Imagine waking up one day to find that the world around you is familiar, yet alien. The streets, the faces, the sounds, all resonate with a sense of routine you have known your entire life. But underneath this veneer of normalcy, something unsettling stirs. Your thoughts, which you have trusted as your own, seem to flicker like faulty neon lights, sometimes bright, sometimes dim, sometimes impossibly fractured. There is a quiet rebellion happening within you, a mutiny in the theater of your mind, and yet, you hardly notice it. You might ask yourself, if I am the master of my own mind, why do certain urges, fears, or desires feel so foreign, so uncontrollable? Why does it sometimes seem as if your consciousness is a passenger rather than a driver? What if the very architecture of thought, memory, perception, belief, is not as obedient as you once imagined? What if the mind, rather than being a loyal servant of your will, harbors its own agenda? Consider a moment when you acted against your better judgment. Perhaps you lashed out at someone you loved, or procrastinated on a task you knew was crucial, or chose comfort over growth. Later, you might have wondered, why did I do that? Was it truly me, or was it a hidden part of my psyche, tugging me like an unseen marionette? Now, magnify that experience, not as an isolated incident, but as a silent, ongoing undercurrent that shapes nearly every decision you make. The rebellion is subtle. It hides in the shadows of rational thought, weaving patterns you cannot consciously see. Philosophers have long pondered this hidden insurrection. Nietzsche spoke of the human will being torn between instincts and intellect, a battlefield where reason is only one combatant among many. Jung described the shadow, that dark, unacknowledged side of the self, whose eruption can dismantle illusions of control. Even in modern psychology, we see echoes of this rebellion, cognitive biases, subconscious drives, and the constant tension between immediate gratification and long-term goals. Yet, despite centuries of thought and study, most of us live in naive certainty, convinced we are fully conscious architects of our lives. But imagine the mind as a house with secret rooms, rooms that hold not memories you recall, but impulses you cannot fully explain. What conversations occur there? What desires pulse through the corridors in silence, shaping your choices without your consent? Every fleeting irritation, every unaccountable moment of joy or despair, might be traced to these hidden chambers. And as you move through life, you carry this silent rebellion like a phantom limb, often unnoticed, but deeply felt. Ask yourself this: is it possible that everything you perceive as control is merely a temporary alliance with forces you do not understand? Could the self you have carefully cultivated be less of a conscious identity and more of a negotiator, trying to broker peace with an internal army of desires, fears, and instincts? And if this is true, what does it mean for free will, for morality, for the very essence of being? Yet, within this unsettling paradox lies a promise: awareness. Even if the mind rebels, it also signals something vital. It signals attention that, when acknowledged, can be transformed. What you have perceived as chaos may in fact be a map, a guide to the deepest truths of your psyche. But to see it, you must first confront the discomfort, the uncanny sense that you are not fully yourself. You must ask the questions that unsettle, that pierce through the comforting illusions of order and certainty. And so, as the quiet rebellion stirs, the question remains: are you merely along for the ride, a passenger in the insurgent mind, or can you awaken to the hidden dynamics that shape your thoughts, your actions, your very reality? What lies beyond the thin veil of conscious thought, beyond the obedient routines and socially conditioned responses, is a terrain both terrifying and exhilarating. It is a place where your mind is no longer entirely yours, and yet, paradoxically, it is the place where true mastery begins. Beneath the surface of your daily thoughts, beyond the veneer of conscious intention, lies a silent architecture of influence. This hidden structure is not merely a collection of random impulses, but a complex system of psychological and philosophical forces shaping your every move. It is here that the mind's rebellion truly takes root, not as a dramatic uprising, but as a subtle, persistent erosion of what you assume is control. Consider Carl Jung's insight into the shadow: the parts of yourself you refuse to acknowledge do not vanish, they accumulate, gaining influence precisely because of their neglect. Every suppressed fear, every denied desire, every socially inconvenient impulse does not disappear, it waits. And in the quiet corners of your mind, these neglected fragments begin to assert themselves, often in ways that feel foreign or alarming. You might call this inner rebellion, but it is more accurately a conversation you have long refused to hear. Friedrich Nietzsche warned that human beings are torn between instinct and reason, a duality that breeds tension, sometimes quietly, sometimes violently. We are creatures of will, yet our will is not singular. It is fractured, inhabited by multiple drives, many of which we cannot name, and fewer still that we can fully understand. This tension is not accidental, it is evolutionary. Our survival has depended on a flexible mind, one capable of contradiction and ambivalence. The rebellion is therefore not a flaw, it is a natural, albeit uncomfortable, feature of consciousness. Yet society compounds the problem. From early childhood, you are trained to favor certain parts of yourself and suppress others. Cultural norms, parental expectations, and institutional demands act like pressure valves, shaping the expression of desire, ambition, and fear. In doing so, they create a fertile ground for internal mutiny. The mind is forced to reconcile what it feels with what it must appear to be. This reconciliation is rarely seamless. Cognitive dissonance forms, an internal friction where what you know conflicts with what you feel. Over time, these unresolved tensions crystallize into subconscious patterns, habits, compulsions, and emotional triggers that seem to act autonomously. Viktor Frankl's reflections on meaning illuminate another layer of this hidden problem. When humans are deprived of a sense of purpose, when life feels governed by arbitrary rules and external pressures, the subconscious mind begins to rebel. It creates distractions, obsessions, and irrational fears, mechanisms meant to reassert a sense of agency in a world that feels otherwise uncontrollable. What appears as aimless wandering or inexplicable anxiety is, at its core, the mind attempting to reclaim some measure of autonomy. Even in the modern context, neuroscience reveals this same struggle. Your prefrontal cortex, responsible for deliberate thought, negotiates constantly with the amygdala, basal ganglia, and limbic system, primitive circuits that respond to threat, reward, and instinct faster than conscious reflection can intervene. The rebellion is both psychological and biological. Jean-Paul Sartre captured the existential dimension of this problem. Consciousness is freedom, yet freedom is a burden. To be aware is to confront the full weight of possibility, to recognize that every choice carries consequences. But awareness alone is not enough to quell the inner insurgency. The more you understand the stakes of freedom, the more the hidden mind resists, seeking safety in habitual, automatic patterns. There is a paradox here. The very insight that should grant mastery often provokes greater inner turmoil. The rebellion thrives in this paradox, at the intersection of knowledge and instinct, of desire and inhibition. Aldous Huxley warned of the subtle controls exerted by external culture, technology, and expectation. The mind's rebellion does not exist in isolation, it interacts with societal forces that exploit the very impulses you struggle to contain. Advertising, social media, and cultural narratives amplify internal conflicts, turning private anxieties into public spectacles and inner rebellion into performance. The subconscious resists being molded, it refuses to be entirely domesticated. And in its quiet, persistent resistance, it reveals truths that conscious rationality often ignores. So, what is the hidden problem? It is the unacknowledged tension between the conscious self and the totality of the mind. It is the collision of instinct with reason, desire with morality, and freedom with fear. It is the pressure of culture, biology, and philosophy converging within you, creating patterns of thought and behavior that often feel alien. And because these forces operate largely beneath awareness, you live as though in partial control, while the rebellion proceeds with methodical patience. This hidden insurgency manifests subtly. Irrational fears emerge when danger is absent. Impulses arise contrary to your values. Repetitive thoughts gnaw at clarity. Moments of self-sabotage occur without apparent cause. And yet, the most insidious aspect is not the actions themselves, it is the erosion of certainty. When the mind mutinies quietly, it destabilizes your sense of identity, leaving you to wonder, who am I, really? And who is pulling the strings behind the curtain of consciousness? But even as this problem is revealed, it is not without potential. Awareness itself is a lever of profound power. To recognize the hidden rebellion is to illuminate the shadowed corridors of the mind. The rebellion, once understood, can be engaged, negotiated with, and eventually transformed. Yet before you can master it, you must first see it for what it is, a persistent, patient, and utterly natural force, shaping your thoughts, your emotions, and your sense of self in ways both subtle and profound. And now, having glimpsed the hidden roots of this insurrection, you begin to sense its trajectory, not merely within yourself, but in the lives of those around you. The consequences are not abstract, they ripple outward, shaping society, relationships, and culture in ways largely invisible, yet deeply consequential. The question lingers, what happens when this silent rebellion is allowed to persist unchecked? The rebellion you have glimpsed is not merely a private affair. Its influence stretches far beyond your own thoughts, quietly shaping your relationships, your decisions, and even the society in which you live. Because it operates largely beneath conscious awareness, its consequences are subtle, insidious, and often misattributed. You might blame circumstances, other people, or sheer chance, but the truth is far more unsettling. The hidden insurgency of the mind has been steering your life in directions you scarcely recognize. Consider the realm of relationships. How often have small misunderstandings escalated into conflicts that seem disproportionate? How often have you reacted to a partner, friend, or colleague not because of what they said or did, but because an old, unacknowledged pattern of thought was triggered? The subconscious mind is a repository of unresolved tensions, and these tensions carry over into every human interaction. A fleeting irritation, a sudden wave of jealousy, an unexplainable withdrawal, these are the echoes of rebellion, rippling outward and shaping connections in ways your conscious mind cannot immediately perceive. Over time, they create emotional patterns so entrenched that they feel like destiny. On a societal scale, the rebellion is no less profound. Cognitive biases, cultural conditioning, and neurological shortcuts conspire with the hidden mind to produce collective behaviors that are often irrational, harmful, or counterproductive. Consider phenomena like groupthink, mass hysteria, or the spread of misinformation. These are not merely failures of intellect, they are manifestations of the same internal forces you experience personally. The unacknowledged mind seeks coherence, security, and gratification, often prioritizing these imperatives over truth or ethical reasoning. When multiplied across millions of individuals, the effects are seismic. Societies drift into patterns they do not consciously choose, yet patterns they collectively sustain. Neurological insights further reveal the depth of this hidden influence. The brain is not a single, monolithic decision maker. It is a complex network of interacting systems, each with its own priorities. The limbic system, responsible for emotion and survival instinct, often reacts faster than conscious deliberation can intervene. Habits, formed over decades, operate like automated scripts, bypassing rational thought entirely. Even memory is selective, reconstructive, and malleable, filtered through biases and desires that operate beneath your awareness. The rebellion, then, is not metaphorical, it is biological. Your brain, in its elegant yet chaotic design, does not fully surrender to conscious control, no matter how disciplined you believe yourself to be. The consequences extend to self-perception and identity. When the mind's rebellion remains unacknowledged, it corrodes confidence and self-trust. You may feel indecisive, inconsistent, or disconnected from your true self. Every attempt at self-mastery seems to falter, not because of a lack of will, but because the forces you contend with are invisible, operating in parallel to your conscious intentions. Anxiety, depression, and existential disquiet often arise from this friction, a mind divided against itself, navigating a world that seems increasingly opaque and uncontrollable. Even creativity and ambition are shaped, often stifled, by this unseen influence. The hidden mind favors comfort, familiarity, and predictability, subtly sabotaging acts of risk, exploration, and vulnerability. You may experience inexplicable hesitation before taking decisive action, or a sudden fear when a bold opportunity arises. These are not random moments of doubt, they are signals of rebellion, the mind asserting its own agenda, sometimes at odds with your conscious desires. Over time, this interference can produce a life of quiet resignation, of deferred dreams and muted potential. Culturally, the consequences multiply. Societal norms, media, and shared beliefs amplify the rebellion by providing frameworks for unconscious behavior to flourish. When millions operate under the influence of hidden patterns, entire cultures adopt habits of thought and behavior that feel normal, but are deeply contingent on unexamined impulses. Propaganda, social pressures, and ritualized behavior all interact with these unseen forces, guiding mass action without the conscious consent of those involved. In this sense, the rebellion is both personal and collective, weaving a network of influence that shapes the world itself. And yet, there is an emotional urgency that accompanies these consequences. It is not meant to instill despair, but to illuminate the stakes. The more the hidden rebellion is ignored, the more profound its effects become, on your choices, your relationships, your creativity, and your perception of reality. The rebellion is patient, persistent, and precise. It does not shout, it whispers, nudges, and subtly steers. It waits for you to remain unaware, for you to act under the illusion of full autonomy, only to reveal itself in moments of frustration, confusion, or regret. To confront the rebellion, you must first recognize it not as an enemy, but as a part of yourself, a force that has its own logic, its own needs, and its own demands. Most people attempt to fight the mind's insurgency through sheer willpower, discipline, or denial. They suppress impulses, ignore anxieties, and try to enforce order where chaos quietly simmers. But the rebellion is not defeated through coercion. It can only be engaged with, understood, and transformed. True mastery begins not by silencing the hidden mind, but by listening. Imagine, for a moment, standing at the edge of a dense forest. The trees sway with a rhythm you cannot predict, shadows twist in ways that defy expectation, and beneath the canopy, life moves according to rules you do not yet know. Most travelers would turn away, fearful of the unknown. But what if the forest contains the keys to your liberation? To navigate it, you must enter it consciously, observe its patterns, and learn to move in harmony with its rhythms rather than against them. This is the essence of breaking free from the mind's rebellion. One radical shift in perspective is to embrace the shadow rather than reject it. Carl Jung emphasized that the parts of yourself you fear or deny are often the very elements that hold the potential for growth, creativity, and authenticity. By acknowledging your hidden impulses and desires, you transform them from covert saboteurs into allies. When you stop resisting your inner complexity, the rebellion loses its clandestine power. You are no longer fighting a ghost, you are negotiating with a dimension of your own psyche. Historical examples illuminate this approach. Leonardo da Vinci, for instance, harnessed his restless curiosity and erratic focus not by suppressing them, but by channeling them into exploration and creation. His apparent distractions were actually manifestations of a mind in dialogue with its hidden drives. Similarly, Viktor Frankl, who endured unimaginable suffering in concentration camps, discovered that the human spirit could reclaim freedom even under extreme constraint by aligning conscious purpose with the demands of the inner self. These are not isolated cases, they reveal a principle: when the mind's rebellion is acknowledged and integrated, it becomes a source of power rather than a source of despair. Contemporary psychology offers practical strategies as well. Mindfulness, meditation, and reflective journaling serve as tools to illuminate unconscious patterns. Cognitive behavioral techniques help identify habitual thoughts and reactions, transforming automatic responses into conscious choices. Neuroplasticity demonstrates that the brain is not fixed. Repeated conscious engagement with hidden patterns reshapes neural pathways, gradually altering the mind's default tendencies. What once felt uncontrollable begins to feel manageable. What once whispered in shadows can speak in the light of awareness. Another powerful approach is radical curiosity. Instead of recoiling from impulses or anxieties, investigate them. Ask yourself, why does this urge arise now? What does this fear truly signify? What story is my mind trying to tell me? By transforming resistance into inquiry, the rebellion shifts from opposition to dialogue. You begin to see patterns not as constraints, but as maps, guides pointing toward unresolved tensions, untapped potential, and unexplored possibilities. Rebellion, however, is not purely an internal affair. It also requires courage in the external world. To break free, you may need to challenge societal expectations, question inherited beliefs, and act contrary to what is deemed safe or normal. This might mean altering your daily routines, forging new relationships, or stepping into creative or professional endeavors that feel risky. The mind often resists these changes precisely because they threaten familiar patterns, but this resistance is a signal, not a barrier. It marks the threshold of transformation. A practical mindset shift is to view the mind's rebellion as a form of communication rather than defiance. Each anxiety, distraction, or self-sabotaging impulse is information, a message from a hidden part of yourself signaling unmet needs, unacknowledged fears, or latent potential. When interpreted with curiosity and compassion, these signals guide you toward self-mastery rather than undermine it. You begin to reclaim agency not by suppressing impulses, but by understanding and integrating them. The process of breaking free is iterative. Progress is uneven, often accompanied by setbacks. You may experience moments where the rebellion asserts itself strongly, reminding you of its enduring presence. This is natural and necessary. It is the mind testing boundaries, probing the limits of conscious control. Resilience lies in persistence and self-awareness, recognizing the force, reflecting on its purpose, and responding intentionally rather than reactively. Ultimately, breaking free transforms your relationship with yourself. The mind's hidden rebellion shifts from a source of anxiety and confusion into a dynamic partner in the journey of life. At last, you arrive at the precipice of understanding. After tracing the rebellion through its hidden roots, its unseen consequences, and the pathways to break free, a deeper revelation begins to emerge, one that redefines everything you have believed about yourself, your choices, and the very nature of reality. The ultimate truth is not merely a solution or a strategy. It is a profound shift in perception, a lens through which all your past struggles, uncertainties, and rebellions suddenly make sense. Imagine standing before a mirror, not just any mirror, but one that reflects not the face you recognize, but the entirety of your consciousness, the conscious, the subconscious, the shadowed, the rebellious, the fragmented. In this reflection, nothing is hidden. Every impulse, every fear, every suppressed desire, and every fleeting thought is visible, not as something to judge, suppress, or control, but as part of a complex, interconnected system that is you. The ultimate realization is that you are not separate from the rebellion. You are not its victim. You are its stage, its witness, and, ultimately, its master. This revelation is both liberating and disorienting. For decades, perhaps a lifetime, you may have believed that mastery meant control, complete, unflinching dominance over thoughts, emotions, and impulses. But control is an illusion. The rebellion does not yield to coercion, it thrives precisely when it is resisted. The paradox is that freedom emerges not from domination, but from integration. When you accept the mind's hidden rebellion as a vital, intelligent, and dynamic part of yourself, its energy can be transformed from chaos into guidance, from resistance into insight. Philosophers have long hinted at this truth in different languages. Nietzsche called for the embrace of life in all its contradictions, the affirmation of what is, even the dark, tumultuous, and rebellious. Jung insisted on facing the shadow, not fleeing it, for in the shadow lies the seed of wholeness. Even in the modern psychological landscape, this principle persists. The mind is not to be controlled or censored, but understood, mapped, and harmonized. The ultimate truth is that the rebellion itself is the path to mastery, the raw material from which awareness, creativity, and authentic selfhood are forged. Consider the metaphor of a river. The hidden mind is like a river running beneath the surface of conscious thought. To dam it, to block it, is to invite flooding and destruction. To ignore it is to remain parched, deprived of the waters of insight it carries. The only path to flourishing is to learn the river's currents, to navigate its twists and depths, and to allow it to inform the direction of your journey. When you do this, the rebellion becomes your compass, pointing you toward the deepest truths of your psyche. The practical implications of this realization are profound. Every emotion you experience, fear, anger, desire, joy, is no longer a potential liability but a signal, a teacher, a messenger from the hidden recesses of your mind. Every hesitation, every impulse, every pattern of self-sabotage is data, rich with meaning, guiding you toward growth. You no longer fight the rebellion, you read it, interpret it, and respond with conscious intention. In this way, the mind's insurgency transforms from a source of anxiety into a wellspring of wisdom. But this truth is not merely introspective, it reverberates outward into the world. When you integrate your own rebellion, you perceive others with unprecedented clarity and empathy. You recognize that everyone carries hidden insurgencies, subtle patterns, and unacknowledged impulses. Conflicts lose their sting, misunderstandings become opportunities for insight, and relationships deepen in authenticity. The ripple effect of mastering the rebellion within yourself extends into society, culture, and collective consciousness. What once felt chaotic and uncontrollable now reveals a pattern, an order not imposed from without, but discovered from within. Ultimately, the most powerful realization is that life itself is not a problem to be solved, but a process to be engaged with consciously.